So I'm Victor. I'm doing a PhD in sociology on climate mitigation scenarios in the EU, and I will be presenting the starting point of my PhD. So current research in ecological economics and environmental history is very clear that the current way the economy is organized is deeply unsustainable. So I identified 7 economic institutions which you have to question if you want to build a sustainable society. So there's economic growth objectives, private property, generalization of markets, wage labor, international trade, entrepreneurship freedom, consumption freedom. So I'm not going to go into the details as to how each of those can be deemed unsustainable, but most of them either foster economic growth, which is inherently unsustainable, or would worsen inequalities in a degrowing or stationary economy. So I did a literature review to see more precisely if those institutions were being questioned in climate mitigation scenarios. So if we look at the world scenarios, there is no scenario in any IPCC database that tries to overcome any of those institutions. All show positive economic growth rates, for example. And the same could be said about markets. The same is true for other worldwide scenarios, such as energy providers scenarios. There is one study by Kaiser Lanson who compares degrowth scenarios with green growth scenarios, but it's not included in the IPCC database because it's not very detailed. And there is the IEA Net Zero Roadmap, which includes some minor sufficiency proposals, which is one way to question consumption freedom, but it's clearly marginal at the worldwide scale. For EU scenarios, almost all of them do not recommend changing any of this institution again. There is the latest European Commission scenarios for the 2040 climate targets that have a sufficiency alternative, but it's not included in the main scenarios, and it's not clear how the reduction in consumption would be achieved. It's not very detailed. There are 3 non-governmental scenarios for the EU which I have found, which include more structural sufficiency, which means changes in regulation and infrastructure. So that's a way to disregard economic growth objectives, and also the increase in regulation challenges the dominance of markets in our economy, but that stays dominant. And if you look at national scenarios in Europe, again, almost all of them do not recommend changing any of those institutions. In the NECPs and LTS, sufficiency measures are very rare and do not guarantee real consumption reductions. There are some ambitious sufficiency scenarios in France, the UK, Germany, probably some other countries, but that, for now that has very little effect on government scenarios. So to conclude, all scenarios which are the basis of international climate governance are deeply unsustainable. All EU and national scenarios in the official spheres are deeply unsustainable. Basically, these scenarios prepare us for the overshoot of pretty much every planetary boundary, which means conflicts, rising inequalities, millions of deaths, etc. And also the large-scale deployment of unproved or dangerous technologies such as CDR. There is a few scenarios which have made very concrete progress towards the reorganization of the economy, but in my point of view, sufficiency measures will not be enough, because in a growth economy, well-being depends on the continuation of economic growth. So in order to be socially just, those scenarios have to decouple well-being from GDP growth, and you can do that by multiple measures, with working time reductions, job guarantees, universal basic services or basic incomes, and that challenges the deeper structures of the economy, such as wage labor, private property, etc. And so the goal of my PhD is to understand why we are so far from where we should be regarding economic institutions in the EU. Thank you.